Well, I go by Britt Inspires, and I love doing inspiration and motivating others. I work in a few different spaces. I do coaching. I help people with life coaching and business coaching, and I also have my own coffee product called Inspiration Cups. I am like obsessed with coffee and inspiration, so I created a sub box called Inspiration Cups, and it has coffee and it has journals, planners, and different inspirational things inside. And that's what I'm all about, is inspiring.
Yay! That's awesome. And for those of you who don't know, I am Jess DeBose, and I help women who are struggling with relationships to connect deeply with themselves so that they can step into their power and stand in the highest versions of themselves. And I also have a few different other projects going on. I create personalized meditations. I do some editing. I just finished my first book called I Don't Hate My Ex-Husband, which will be available on Amazon starting June 23rd. Though you can pre-order a signed copy today, and I can put my web address in the comments when we're finished with this. And I'm also working on creating a group coaching program for people who have lost loved ones to suicide.
Wow. Wow. That's beautiful.
Yeah. So what questions do you have for me today?
Oh my gosh. So many. So many questions. So what got you into doing what you do today? Like, what brought you to this space of being a relationship coach or dating coach?
Yeah. So I have been coaching my entire life. I just didn't know that's what I was doing. And when I was in like middle school and high school, I had friends who would ask me if I was going to like go to school for counseling. And I was like, oh, I don't want to get paid for that. So I ended up going into music education instead. But a few years ago, I was actually looking to get my master's in counseling because I wanted to do something different, and realized that it's actually where my heart is helping people in that way. And I came across an organization called the Hendricks Institute, found out that they had a coaching program. So I got my coaching certification through them, and really just jumped in. And as I was trying to decide who I wanted to coach, because you can say you're a life coach, but really it's important to know who it is that you're trying to reach, because there's all different types of coaches out there. And my coach found out that I was writing a book called I Don't Hate My Ex-Husband, and she's like, well, why don't you coach people in that arena? And I was like, oh, okay. So that is my focus.
Wow. So you had a life coach. Do you feel like having a life coach, especially in the area of dating and just like overall life, do you think that that is something everyone should look into? Or is that something that, like, how do you know when you need to get that kind of support in your life?
Well, I would say that everyone needs a life coach right now. Not just because of the times we're in, but just because that's how I feel even before 2020 happened.
Yeah. 2020 happened. That's so funny.
Yeah, so I would advocate that, but you know when you're ready for a change, when you're looking to really like step into something new, and you're like wanting to actually like go after your dreams and goals. And the reality is that anyone who's ever been great has had a coach, right? Like anybody who's anybody really has somebody helping them hold up a mirror to see the blind spots, because we weren't designed to live this life by ourselves. And you can grow on your own and do a lot of reading and different things, but you can only take yourself so far, because you can't see all of yourself. You can't see the blind spots. You can't see some of the steps in front of you sometimes. And if you just find somebody who's 3 steps ahead of you, they'll be able to help you in that direction. And there's I forget who said it, but there's a person who said, like, you're basically only as good as the 5 closest people to you. And so when you are seeking for something different, you have to be around somebody who's different. You can't continue to stay in the same group of people that you're in order to move somewhere different. And so when you're in that space, that's really like imperative to find a coach to help you in that, to move in that direction.
Yeah, no, I agree. I 100% agree. I think the hardest thing is like when you're in that space trying to figure out like, okay, I see what's around me and I see what I need to like change. And so having a coach to get through that is definitely necessary. I agree. I agree. I remember when okay, so you talked a little bit about your first coach. I remember when I got my first like coach a few years back, and it was just amazing, absolutely amazing. And I recommend it. Like, I agree with you. Like, you need someone to help you level up in life. But what brought you to the point where you felt like, oh man, I need to reach out to a life coach?
I got divorced. So, well, in the process of the heartache of the stuff that happens right before you actually get divorced is really, really painful and difficult. And so when I was going through that space, I recognized that I wanted to like go to counseling. But at the time, I had a very different mindset about a lot of stuff. And at the time, I was like, well, we can't really afford for both me and my ex to go to counseling. So I opted for him to do it and not me. And so when we actually ended our relationship, I was like, oh, well, I guess I can do this now. And so I found someone who's, she identifies as a counselor, but I really think that she's also a coach. And it was just this really beautiful experience to have somebody hold up a mirror and show me things that I wasn't seeing. And like, the reality is I didn't know that I didn't love myself. And so that year of time with her was really learning how to love myself. And then after I finished up coaching with her, I ended up finding the Hendricks Institute and did some seminars that changed my life. And then a few months ago, in November of 2019, I found this program called Kaboom, which is a coaching program that really teaches you the business side of coaching. But not just that, like they advertise as being like gaining clarity, confidence, and cash flow, which is absolutely accurate. But even more than that, I gained this new family. And so now I'm also a support coach for that program. And it's been really amazing to not only go through the program myself, where I was able to, quit my job and go full time into coaching, but then now I'm also coaching coaches who are going through the program as well. And it's so amazing.
That is beautiful. I love it. Community is everything, and being able to find that in business is just life. That's a lifeline.
Yes.
That's awesome. So what advice would you give to someone who's at a point in their life where they're conflicted on some of the changes that they need to make in their life, whether it's people or just changes from jobs or whatever, but they know they need to make a change, but it's scary. It's scary. The other side is scary. Like, what advice would you give someone who's in that space of making that change? How do you do something like that? Like making a decision to like move forward in a divorce or breakup or whatever the case is. Like, how do you know if that's the right choice? Like, how do you know if that's how do you get to that space and actually make that type of decision?
Yeah. So lean in would be the easiest advice I would give, is to lean in. But more than that, like I've been saying this for a really long time, but anything worth doing in life is scary. Anything in life and worth doing is scary. And I remember telling that to a friend of mine who was moving to South Korea to teach English, and then I ended up following her there actually. Yeah, because she was just like scared but wanted to do it and didn't know. And the reality too is like getting to when you are really connected to yourself, like you will just know. there is no right and wrong. There is no black and white. We've created these things that are not real in our minds and in our society. And so we're afraid to move to make the wrong decision. But the reality is there is no wrong decision. And so just leaning in and like trusting yourself and knowing that you've got you no matter what happens.
That's beautiful. That's really beautiful. Can you you brought up true self, and this is something that I personally have been studying and trying to understand more, wanting to be more authentic, wanting to be more real and honest and upfront with who I am with other people. What would you say? What would be your advice for someone who wants to be like more honest and real, like upfront and authentic and in their true self? How do you even get to a space where you're in your true self? Like, how do you know you are there?
Well, having someone in your life that could call you out on your bullshit is really helpful with that, for sure. I know. Shout out to my ex-husband who tried really hard to help me with that. And I often uh, didn't understand that's what was happening. Because
Oh.
I actually have a chapter in my book called I'm Not a Writer, which is hilarious. But we had an argument about that at one point in our relationship. I was like so defiant on like, I am not a writer. I'm not a writer. I'm not a writer. Because in my mind, I was comparing myself to like Morris, my ex, who is a writer. He claims to be a writer. He has this whole process of writing. He writes all the time, and he has a book too. And so at the time, I didn't have a book. Um, and I was just claiming that I wasn't a writer because it was like an identity thing. Like I didn't identify as a writer because in my mind, what it meant to be a writer was blank.
Yeah.
But he saw I have journals. I have boxes of journals from the time I was 10 years old. Like from the time I was 10 until I was 17, I wrote every single day in a journal. I have many papers. I wrote newsletters for my job at the time. I had a blog.
Wow.
And like, so I was doing all of these things that I was writing all the time, and I was just not identifying as a writer. And so, but that's a bunch of bullshit. Like, and I didn't know that was happening. And oftentimes when we don't identify with something, we have this resistance to it. And
Oh, yeah.
so that's what I was having. I was having this like big temper tantrum resistance to something that I was like, no, I don't know, like kicking and screaming into it. And now I'm a fucking author. Like, so it's kind of hilarious and amazing that I didn't identify as that. But when you are trying to find your true self, having somebody in your life that can hold up that mirror and be like, well, this is what I actually see. Because we are, as humans, I don't know what it is in our programming, but we are our own worst critic, and we are so critical of ourselves. And when you are actually start to catch that and recognize that, wow, I would never talk to any other human being the way that I talk to myself, and then you start to actually talk to yourself how you would talk to someone you love, it's a very different experience. And then you can actually get to know yourself because you're not resisting yourself anymore.
Yeah. No, that's amazing. And that's so true. That's so true. Oh, man. It's like if you just like think about it, I'm processing a lot of this information. It's really, really good. It's making me think.
Take your time.
Yeah, but it's interesting how having someone in your life to kind of hold up the mirror, um and that's something that is challenging even for me. Like, I love the people who are like, oh my god, you're so awesome, Brittany, like, oh, you're so cool. But then you have that person in your life that's like, hold up, like, these are areas that you need to like work on and you need to address, and so I was learning a little bit about the like a false identity in a sense. And you kind of brought up like finding your identity. And so like a false identity of how you think you should be or who you are, who you always thought you were, and then like the true identity of who you really are. And like you brought up, even like there's no white or black to it, you know, like it's literally you know, you are just who you are. And there's no right or wrong to it too. And I'm like really trying to process that, you know, like really trying to understand, like, oh, because I'm so critical of myself. Like I am like my biggest critic. You were so right. Like literally do something wrong and I'm like, oh my God, Brittany, what were you thinking? You're so crazy. Like, and I'm like beating myself up constantly. And then like while I'm beating myself up, the person who's genuinely trying to show me myself in a mirror, like it's hard for me to accept that. So what would you say when it's time to accept the, you know, the constructive criticism from the confidant or the person who sees your flaw or sees that there's an area of improvement and is holding that mirror up to you? How do you receive that without feeling like attacked or feeling like you're just coming for me today? But it's more like, no, let me show you where you need to improve. So
Yeah.
how do you do that? Like, how do you let go of your own ego and pride to accept that kind of constructive criticism?
Well, giving and receiving feedback is really an art and something that like I've had to practice a lot because I definitely was not a good receiver of feedback when I was married specifically. Was not. And sometimes it's still really hard. So what you get to do is like, first of all, you have to check in with yourself about who you're receiving feedback from. Like, is this actually someone you trust? Is this someone you know has your back and wants to see you win? If that's the case, then you get to say, okay, thank you, ego, for being here, but you're not welcome, and really take a good look at what this person is saying. And rather than resisting it, is like being open and really curious about yourself. Like, wow, that's a really interesting perspective. I really wonder about that. And then instead of taking it on as criticism and, oh my gosh, I'm bad and I did something wrong and I have to fix myself, because Brittany, you're not broken. You are perfect, whole, and complete, yet unfinished. When you move into that mindset, there's a different thing that happens when you're receiving feedback, because then you're like, wow, this person wants to see me win and I really value growth. So let me hear what they have to say and let me really sit on, okay, does this resonate with me? Am I just resisting this because I'm afraid? Am I resisting this because, oh, I don't actually agree with that? And it's okay if you disagree as well. But it's like actually getting curious rather than judgmental. And I think that's a huge difference. Ooh, yeah, judgment versus being curious. And I feel like that lands for so many levels of what's happening in our society right now, and what's happening in ourselves, and then what happens in our communities and in our families. Like when you are in a space of judgment, there's something very different that happens than when you're genuinely curious.
Wow, that's powerful. That's really powerful, because if you're curious, you want to ask more questions of what's going on. Like, keep talking to me, and opposed to, no, you're just being critical. I don't have time for that, and you shut it off. That's interesting. I have another question that just came to mind, and it's on the lines of communicating. Like communicating with someone that you love in a like an intimate relationship, and how do you communicate? Like, you find yourself wanting to say certain things and like communicate your needs, but then you like go blank. But like in your own space, you know what you like want to say and like how you feel, but in the moment you're like, does that, like, what do you do in that space?
I sense that there is some personal experience with that.
I clam up every time it's time for me to deal with like serious situations or like legit have a real conversation in business, in relationships, with anything. I tend to like shy away from addressing or being direct in the situation. I tend to shy away and dance around everything because it's safer for me. It feels more safe. But my question is, how do you practice that directness? How do you practice being the type of person who like is authentic in how they feel and able to communicate that effectively without being so afraid of the reaction of the other person?
Well, you just do it.
Overthink.
You just practice. Like, that's how that works. But I'm really curious, like, what is happening, if you don't mind me asking, like, what is going on underneath that? So you're skirting around and dancing around it because it feels safer, but why? Why does it feel safer?
I don't know. It's just really it's that's actually a great question, you know, because like I never dove into that. Like I never really thought through like why do I feel like I can't just be like, and maybe because in the past when I have expressed myself when I was younger, maybe, or with certain people, and being shut down or being told not to feel or not to, or not feeling like my feelings are valid. Like the second I open up and start talking about how I feel, it's like, why do you feel like that? You shouldn't feel like, you know, and you're just like, shut down, shut down, shut down. And then you start like, wait, should I be feeling like that? Is something wrong with me? Like, what's going on? And so, like, I feel like maybe it's because, like, I've been shut down from my like my feelings are not valid enough to be able to communicate it. I tend to say, well, like why would I try?
So do you think that your feelings are valid?
I'm starting to like really get to the point where it's like, hey, like if I feel a certain way, it's a feeling, it's there, it's real. It's not something to like ignore or be passive about. Like it's there. Like I feel this way. I should communicate it. And I'm challenging myself. Like I'm reading this book, and I told you about it. Like this book, the Mystic Path to Cosmic Powers. Remember I told you about this one?
Mm-hmm.
So I started reading it, and it has a chapter in it where it says, just say what you need to say without any fear. And don't be afraid of what's going to happen next. Like just speak. Just say what you need to say to the situation that you're nervous. Oh my gosh, it's just like, just do it. Because it's like, fear is not real. And whatever's going to happen is not going to be like that bad. So like I've been challenging myself to do that, and I tell you that is scary. It like terrifies me to speak my mind about certain things to certain people. I get so scared. I'd be like, oh my gosh, I just, you know, and like the reaction, I don't want to hurt anyone. I come from a place of, I used to be a big people pleaser. So like I thought I just need to make everyone happy around me. And if everyone is happy and pleased around me, then I could be happy and pleased. But then I found that me always pleasing someone else, always just, oh, whatever you want, whatever you need, I'm here for you, like for you. I realized like I started to have resentment, I started to have frustrations, and I started to feel like my needs are not being, like I don't feel fulfilled in my side, on my side of things. So I had to get away from being a people pleaser and start seeing what do I like? What makes me happy? What makes me feel like I'm in my true self? And so that's been a process. But communicating, that's like the hardest thing for me. And I like, you're gonna laugh, I'm a communications major. Like I studied communications in college.
Of course.
Now, and I come out as an adult woman and I can't communicate to certain situations. I'm like, I can't say it, you know?
Yeah, so there are several things. One, okay, I actually would reframe some of the stuff that you said about that book, and rather than that fear is not real, I actually think that fear is real. And instead of resisting the fear, is leaning into the fear. Because you can't, as you know, we are often told like don't be afraid. But when you think about fear and how it actually works, you can't just say don't or go away. Like that's just not how fear works. And so it's not being afraid, it's being afraid and doing it anyways.
Mm.
And there's also this really beautiful thing that the Hendricks Institute has developed. They're called fear melters.
Okay.
And what they do is like, there are 4 different types of fear. There's freeze, fight, flee, faint. And so, for example, my tendency is to freeze when I'm in fear.
Yeah.
That's like my top fear signature. And so what happens in your body is a very specific with that type of fear, right? So I just went like this, my whole body clenched up, and I'm being dramatic on purpose, but more subtly, this is what happens when you're scared and you're frozen scared and your eyes are like a deer in the headlights and you're like, I don't know what to do. So I'm just going to stay still and hope that it goes away. Right.
Yeah.
And to be able to move through that fear, you do the opposite thing with your body. So you just start wiggling. And then all of a sudden you feel a little bit more grounded and you get to physically move through the fear.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that works with the other three as well. So when you flee, you're like running away. So instead, you lean in and do like a sumo wrestler position and ground yourself. With the fight fear, you like ooze your body because you literally cannot fight if you're oozing. And then the last one is a faint fear. And what happens when you have faint? It's not necessarily like a physical blackout faint. It's like it's almost like you go dumb. Like all of a sudden you're like, I don't know. Like really, you're a very intelligent person, but you're like, I don't know the answers to any of these questions. And it's almost like your soul is like, what?
That's the one that happens to me all the time. Like that's it. Like I literally will articulate something all day, and then in the moment of when I need to articulate it, I'm like, I don't know how I feel.
Yeah, and that's like your soul is kind of removed from your body.
Yeah. You just go blank. You're just like, where am I? What's going on?
Yeah, so that's a type of fear. So what you do with that one is you picture a pool of love in front of you, whatever that looks like for you. For me, it is like lots of water, and sometimes the water changes color and whatever. But sometimes it changes. But you imagine whatever a pool of love. It could be like glitter or whatever you want. And then you take scoops of it and just place it on different parts of your body. Just putting love on your body physically. And it's amazing what happens because you can shift then from, I don't know, panic to, okay, I'm here, I'm loved, I'm grounded. Okay, now I can share.
Yeah.
So that was one thing. What was the other thing? Oh, are you familiar with the drama triangle?
No.
Okay. So this is one of my favorite things to talk about. Besides fear melters, that's another one. So the drama triangle, there's the hero, the villain, and the victim. And so when you are playing in the drama triangle, that's what's happening, drama. So as a recovering people pleaser myself, I often played in the hero part of the triangle all the time.
Yeah.
Now, what happens when you do that is when I try to play the hero and save everyone and make everyone happy, what I'm actually doing is avoiding being the perceived villain and when I view people as a victim, I actually am viewing them as less than and not empowering them.
Wow.
And so the opposite of the drama triangle is the winner's triangle. And so instead of hero, you become the coach. Instead of victim, you become the creator. And instead of the villain, you become the challenger. And there's a very different thing that happens because then everybody is winning. But when you're in the drama triangle, everyone is losing.
Wow.
So by avoiding conversations with people to make them happy, you're trying to hero them by not being the perceived villain. And then therefore you are saying you're less than and you can't handle what it is I have to say.
Wow, that is powerful. That is so powerful. Wow. That is food for thought. That's food for thought for sure. Oh my gosh. So basically like show them the respect of just saying what's on your heart and on your mind and be real with them. That's like respect and honor to them instead of treating them like they can't. Wow.
Yeah, exactly. And yes, it is scary, and it's something you get to practice. So to answer your original question, you just get to practice that over and over again. When you feel that fear, you can do those fear melters and
Yeah.
and then step in and say, okay, I'm really scared and I'm going to do it anyways. So here's what I have to say, and let it come out unfiltered. Like, it's actually really fun. Like, if you are going to play in the drama triangle, like, do it on purpose and dramatically. It is hilarious when you do it on purpose and you're aware of what's happening. I have seen my one friend and her husband have done it, and they'll be like yelling at each other, but in a very playful way, like, oh my gosh, you're such a victim right now. Like, and just leaning into it real hardcore, or just like, wow, like, just when you start to recognize it, just like, oh wow, I'm being a hero right now, let me stop, and I don't need to hero you because I'm only responsible for me and you're responsible for you, and I'm not responsible for your reaction.
Wow. I'm not responsible for your reaction.
And their reaction does not get to dictate your worthiness.
Wow. That's powerful. Like, because it's understanding that separation between someone else's reaction to you. I tend to react off of other people's reactions. Of course, in communication, that's just how it goes. Like, you see that this person's getting uncomfortable or irritated, and so you correct yourself. But you're just don't even, how they react is how they react. It's separate from how you feel and where you're at, right?
Obviously, you don't want to be a dick. Like, make sure you're being kind, you know? But, like,
In the most loving and,
yeah,
yeah.
so you want to be kind. And being loving and kind sometimes looks like hard. Sometimes people need a kick in the ass. Um, and like, wow, I am not getting something that I need right now. And we have talked about this before, and you committed to doing this and you're not doing it. We need to talk about this. And just saying, like, I really need this, or I really don't like when you do this. Like, it's just really important. And for the other person to actually receive that, it's so powerful to be able to, like, really, like, I tell people, I have told exes before, like, I would rather you hurt my feelings than not tell me, because my feelings will pass. And then I will have a deeper understanding of what it is that you're going through. And, like, we can actually have a conversation around it. But, like, just tell me. And it doesn't have to be, like, filtered or whatever. Like, just tell me I'm being a dick. Like, whatever it is. I would rather you just say it and then we talk about it, instead of me making up the stories in my head, because we are story making beings. If we don't know a thing, we will make up a story about it.
True. Wow. True. Very true. We'll connect the dots some way in our mind. Wow. This is good conversation.
What's coming up for you right now as you're thinking about all this stuff?
Oh my gosh, like a lot of different things. I'm just like in the space that I'm in right now, and my own journey of discovering true self. Um, I'm being confronted. Like, I'm being confronted in every area of my life, and it's beautiful, but it's also kind of scary, and it's also like challenging, because every aspect of my life is being brought to me in this way where it's like I'm faced to see it at face value. And that, like, it's easier to just ignore things. It's easier just to be like, it's not that, this is not. But when you have to deal with your life, you have to deal with everything that you chose up to the point that you're at, and start facing them head on. Like you said, lean in and start doing something about each aspect, and speaking up to every element of like a relationship, or even family, or whatever's going on. I mean, like, I've been having these really, we've talked about this, about my relationship with my own father, and having like conversations with my dad that like honestly like are in depth into like, to the point like what happened when I was a kid and why did it happen that way, and like he's telling me stories about like his own depression and things that he went through. And for me, it's a challenging conversation to have, but it's connecting all the dots as to why everything played out the way that it did. And it's like I needed that. Like I needed to hear the raw truth of what happened instead of like ignoring it. And so my past history and working through that, my present situation and working through that, and then developing the future of what I want to be and developing and working through that. And all of it is it's not running away from the contrast and the conflict. I'm being faced with conflict in my face, even in society today. Like I feel like everything that's happening in society, it's like all the stuff that we used to be like, oh, like okay, and just like sort of like bypassing. It's like now we're addressing the elephant in the room. Now we're addressing that. Now I feel like I'm addressing the elephant in the room in my life and in like every other aspect of society. So it's heavy stuff, and it's working through it and trying to figure out like, okay, how do I process, take action? What's the best course of action? How do I address these issues? So yeah, that's what's coming up. It's a lot.
Yeah. And can I offer a reframe for some of that?
Yeah.
Okay. First of all, what all of this means for you is that you're about to level up in a huge way, Brittany. Like, I could feel that from you. But, and all of this is choice. Like,
Yeah.
you can run away from it. That you can. And you probably won't level up if you do. Wow. But it is your choice. You get to do whatever it is you want to do. It's not that you have to do anything. And that's the beauty of this, is that you get to if you want to. Yeah. And then if you do choose to lean in and you level up, like, you don't have to work on and figure it out. It's like, how can you receive it with ease and grace and love and playfulness, like, rather than resisting all of it and have tos and shoulds. Like, I get to, and how can I create this with ease? That's a much different conversation.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. I love that reframe. It's beautiful because it becomes like this beautiful journey and path to reconciling things. I love it. That's beautiful.
Yeah.
I feel like too, like there's been like conflicting energy, but there's also been energy of like people coming around and like kind of graciously guiding me into like that space. And it's been good. It's been really good. It's been a nice ease into like changes that I have to like, or changes that I'm making in my life. It's like a nice ease into it.
And look at you already editing yourself. You said I have to, and you're like, no, the things I'm making. That's good.
I did that unconsciously. I'm trying to really work too on how I speak, like how I'm speaking, because I notice a lot of the words, the way that I'm speaking, it needs to be reframed. That's why you're like, hey, say it this way. And it feels so much better speaking in that way of like, oh, I'm letting it flow and etc. Yeah, I like it. That's awesome.
Yeah, words are so powerful and we don't often even recognize. And I'm very intentional with my language and how I speak, especially to myself. And it has made the biggest difference in my life. It has changed my life dramatically because I had an ex-boyfriend point out to me in college that I would say out loud to other people all the time that I was stupid. I graduated the top of my class in high school. Like, I am not stupid by any means, but I called myself stupid all the time. And so the people pleaser in me shifted the language for him. And so I would say, I'm silly. And I would just change the word. But what happened was, like, I started to view myself differently because I started changing my language. And then, the newest one I have right now is that I get to. I've changed all of my language. Instead of saying I have to or I need to, I've changed it to I get to. even so much as like, I get to do laundry. Like, because I would say, oh, I have to do laundry. It's like, no, I get to do laundry, so I have clean clothes to wear. Like, and it just feels different. Like, I am almost excited about doing laundry. Not something I've ever been excited about doing before, but just because I've changed my language around it in the past month, it has shifted the way I view it.
Wow. No, I love that. I definitely am going to incorporate more of I get to's in my life. It expresses gratitude. Like you're grateful for the opportunities that you have, like that you have clothes to wash, that you have bills to pay, or whatever the case is. That's really nice.
Yeah, and I got that one because I leveled up and I'm around other people who use that all the time. And so the people in my life would say things when we would be on a Zoom call and they needed to go, they would say, "Oh, I get to go now." And I was like, that's such a different way than saying I have to go or I need to go or making some excuse. Like, no, I'm choosing to leave now. And that's okay. And it's beautiful.
It's time for me to go now. That's awesome.
Like, I get to go.
I get to go.
Mm-hmm.
This is awesome. This is really good stuff.
I'm so glad.
Yeah.
You can tell I'm like ridiculously passionate about all of this. This is like,
You can totally tell. I'm just gonna touch. I could totally tell your energy is like all about like the stuff, and it's amazing because a lot of people, and I would say a lot of people, in even in relationships or not in relationships, I think this whole COVID-19 challenged that whole construct. Whether you were single or whether you're in a relationship, I think everyone got challenged in that area. But it's such a space that we're kind of private about. Although some people are really open and they talk about their relationship all the time. But some people are really like the people that are private about it, they go through a lot and don't even ever communicate what they're dealing with. Or and I can only imagine all the different types of relationships or the type of singleness during this time where people have had to face themselves, had to face their relationship head on. Like there was people, I had friends who told me like, I never dealt with my husband like this. Like I'm literally like, we used to have opposite schedules and like I had to go to work and he had to go to work. And so like we saw each other at night. Now it's like we see each other all day, every day. And so you're dealing with that relationship. You're dealing with that person. And so it's interesting to like see everyone have to kind of face that. And even for like myself, you know?
yeah. And there was time too. We got so much into this space where there wasn't enough time for anything, and the universe is like, okay, I'm gonna give you all the time.
All the time for me. All the goals. All the stuff you said you wanted to do.
Yeah, so there's only so many TV shows and games before you get bored, and then all of a sudden people are like, oh my gosh, like I know this is really sad. Um, and I don't know this for certain because I don't know what the numbers are around it, but I'm fairly certain I heard somewhere that there has been a spike in suicides.
Oh, see, and I had a feeling when this all happened, I knew in my spirit that something like that was going to happen. I'm a huge advocate for mental health because I know people suffer silently. People suffer silently. And whoever's suffering prior to all of this chaos, I'm sure that only heightened it. So to hear that there was a spike, it's just like, that breaks my heart.
Yeah.
That breaks my heart because I know, like, I've had people in my circle that have committed that act and like just said I'm done. And so like that's why this work is so important. I feel like this work is so important because for those who are suffering silently and who feel like they can't talk to anyone, like I'm just saying whoever's listening to this live, like reach out. You know, like I recall, and we talked about getting coaches. Like I remember like when I first reached out to a coach and I was in a space where I literally was dealing with somewhat depression. I would say mild, but it was when I got connected with somebody who could help guide me out of that space of being like, oh, I feel alone, or I feel like this is too much, you need support. And I just encourage anyone who's dealing with like that. I just wanted to say it because like I feel like when I was dealing with my challenges, like I just felt like I had to deal with it myself, and it just made it worse. Trying to silently, and I'm like the happy person. Like I smile all the time. I'm like, I'm so happy. And everyone's like, oh my gosh, I can't even imagine you, Brittany, being sad. And the crazy thing is yeah, dude, I've been through it, you know, like, and I thought because everyone perceived me in a certain way that I couldn't show or talk about it.
And that's something that we've been talking about in my coaching circles for a few weeks now, is like holding the space for duality, because you don't have to just be happy or sad. You can be both.
Wow.
You can
Love it.
be,
Duality.
yeah, you can be all of the things at the same time. And so that's something I've been practicing a lot, is like, there's a lot of amazing, exciting things happening in my personal life. And there are some sad things and devastating things happening in my life. So I am moving to Oregon on Friday, and I'm very excited about that, and I'm really sad about that. And I can be both, and I don't have to do one or the other. Like, it doesn't have to be that way. And I was spending time with somebody today, and I was both enjoying the time because I knew it was one of our lasts before I leave, and then I was also really sad. And so I laughed and I danced, and I also was crying, and I was holding both, because both kind of exist at the same time. It doesn't have to be one or the
That's powerful. That's something that I've been learning as well, the duality piece. And I guess, and that goes back to identity. What are you identifying yourself as? And I also learned this recently, like when you feel depressed or when you feel sad, instead of saying I feel depressed or I feel sad or I feel this, you say if it feels depressed or it feels depressing, you know? And you detach
other.
yourself.
Or, yeah, another way I've heard it is like, I'm experiencing sadness.
Yeah. Instead of like identifying as internalizing it as I am, because when when you do that, you sort of step into it like as if that's your identity. Like it's not who you are. You're not you're not depressed, you know. And I had to like, that's what helped me too, is just like, you're not sad. It just feels, it's a feeling that will pass. And like you said, duality, you can feel sadness but also feel great happiness. It doesn't have to be one or the other.
And the, in order to experience great joy, you get to experience great sadness. Like, that is how the yin and yang and everything works, and that's the order of how life works. And if you're going to continue to avoid the negative things, you will never experience the greatest joy and like amazing way that you can feel, because you're avoiding the negative things. And so when you welcome them all and stop resisting the feelings, like, okay, I'm going to experience sadness, and I'm going to, and like, if you've ever seen a toddler, toddlers go through feelings like this, right? Like, they'll be like sobbing or screaming for 30 seconds, and then all of a sudden they're laughing and running around, and you're like, what? And as an adult, we like beat that out of ourselves, but actually, like, it's very possible to do that as an adult. We just get to practice it.
True, true. It makes me think of that movie, All the Emotions, the cartoon. I don't know if it was called Emotions, but they had all those different. They
It's
triggered
called
me.
Inside Out.
Yeah, that's cool. That's cool stuff. I like that.
Yeah. Well, I want to be mindful of our time. It has been a delight to talk with you, Brittany.
Oh my gosh, I always love connecting. Like the first time we talked, I was like, oh my gosh, this girl is amazing. And so like I'm so excited. I didn't say in the beginning, but I'm so excited and so honored to just be able to have this open conversation with you in this space. And I just appreciate you for creating this space for that, because it is healing. it is healing. So keep doing what you're doing, girl. Like, you're changing lives one step at a time. So one call at a time, one person at a time. So keep doing that. It's amazing.
Thank you. Thank you. Something I'm also practicing is actually receiving. So I'm just like, okay, I'm going to receive that.
Take it all in.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Thank you all for watching, and we'll tune in next week for the next interview, Jess, and let me know if you are interested in interviewing me, because you could be like Brittany and come in here and talk to me. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.